how is everyone doing this morning? If this is your first time here, hi, my name is Carrington. If you've been here a few times but have not yet hit that subscribe button, I absolutely invite you to do so. If you're a returning member, hi, miss y'all. So let's go ahead and we're going to dive on into today's video, which is ranking the last 5 books that I have read. I do this as often as I can, but I've been doing it a whole lot at work now, like just like in between calls and like tasks, things like that. I'll just pick up a book and read. So lately I've been plowing through some books. So I have these last 5 that I have read. We're going to rank them and I'm going to tell you why they're ranked the way they are and what I think of the book. So if you guys are excited to see what books I read, how I would rank them, then buckle up kitty cats and let's dive on in. Coming in 5th place is this book called In Her Head. So I am in like some book groups on like Facebook, things like that, and a new author, she said she had just published her first book on Amazon, and I always like to try to support like new authors, things like that. So I decided that I was going to purchase this book. It was pretty cheap. I want to say it was like $4, $5. As you can tell, it's a very thin book. The writing is a lot of spacing. And how many pages is there altogether? Does it even say, or like, no. Oh wait, they don't even have page numbers. Oh yeah, that's another weird thing. They don't even have like page numbers, but there's not a lot of pages in here. That's not why I hate this. That's not why I hate this. Okay. So this is about a girl whose twin brother goes missing. And nobody knows where where he has gone. And she decides that she is going to map out the last steps that he took, the last known steps that he took, to see if maybe he can if she can either find him or if she's going to find out what happens to him. So she goes all the steps and she makes it to this town, which is the town that he went in. And that's when a lot of like really weird stuff starts happening. And then she does eventually find her brother, and she finds out that the cops that were supposed to be helping her find her brother were actually in on this whole scheme. It's like the whole synopsis of this sounds like really good. Like that would be such an interesting book. But I feel like with just like the limited number of pages and how big the spacing is, I feel like it leaves a lot to be desired. Like we could have really have went like more in depth. We could have figured out why this kid was wanting to go, what was going through his head and thoughts. We could have really seen like a lot of good character developing in this, as well as we could have seen a really, really good storyline that I feel like really like deep dived into the whole situation that her brother was in. I try not to ruin books because in case you guys want to read it, but the situation that he ends up in, I feel like it could have really just like gone deep down as to how this cult was like made and how everybody's still staying there, and just like if this person who's working the case is working the case for all these other missing people, so that's why nobody ever finds them. It's very wild, but again, it just doesn't really leave a lot. It leaves a lot to be desired. Like we really could have gotten a lot of good character development. There were also a ton of spelling errors, or like sometimes it would be like what like it would have 2 whats when it only needed 1, which I get for like a first-time author who may not have had like a lot of proofreading or people to proofread. Makes sense, but this could have been a really, really, really good book had it just had more depth in there. Okay, coming in 4th place, don't come for me on this one. My daughter, she's in 3rd grade, and her school, which is an intermediate school, so there's elementary, intermediate, middle school, then high school. I don't know why it is the way it is, but it is the way that it is. Anyways, their whole entire school was given this book to read, and they were supposed to read it with their parents. We're like, I read a page, she read a page, so on and so forth. So that's what we did. That's what we did. It was good. So it's the one and only Ivan. This is obviously like a young adult book. It's pretty short pages. It's 300 pages, but like the pages in and of itself are, relatively short. But I know a lot of you probably won't read this because like it's a young adult, right? Like you're probably just not going to care. So fine. So with this, it's very sad. My daughter if you choose to read this with your children, I would say if you have somebody that is very sensitive, this may not be the book. So this is about the one and only Ivan. So basically, it starts off with Ivan the gorilla and Stella, this is not Stella, a full-grown elephant, and there's Bob the dog. And they live in this mall. So this guy bought out part of the mall and turned into like one of the department stores into a domain for this guy. They're basically, he was just living in like a department store mall. There was no trees, there was nothing there. And then there was an elephant that was next to him in another area who was chained, you know, they all had to be chained to things, and then people would come and pay to come and see them. This book is real deep because you find out that Ivan, all of his family were killed, and him and his sister, when they were babies, were taken by the mall owner, and the sister was too rowdy, too rambunctious, so she was killed as well, a young gorilla. Then you have Stella, this elephant, who was taken away from her family as well, and unfortunately, because she's tied to these metal shacks, she got an infection in her foot, and it was brought to the attention of the owner. And he's like, oh, I don't have the money for the vet bills. And then she dies, and they just throw her in a trash truck. Like, literally, a trash truck. It says, I was like, yeah, they just took her in a trash truck. What the fuck? Okay, so there's that. So then he goes and gets a new baby elephant who they name Ruby. And there's Bob, that is this dog that just kind of keeps them company. He just, like, sneaks in there. And Ivan, the gorilla, the guy will sometimes give him paint. So he can paint pictures, so that a way they can make money. Okay, like, all right. So then Ivan gets this idea that he is going to paint a whole bunch of pictures, make a billboard to hopefully be able to free Ruby, because he doesn't want Ruby to have to live her life in this, like, mall. And find out that Ruby's whole entire family was killed, so that a way they could collect her. Okay, well, Ivan does get the attention of newscasters, and the newscasters, publicize it, and people are then rioting against them all because of the horrible treatment of, like, the animals. And so they do get taken away, and they get to go to a zoo, and they each, Ivan goes with the gorillas, Ruby goes with the elephants, and Ivan was able to see Ruby again in the future and see how happy she was to be with other elephants. But at the same time, he was sad because now he doesn't get to see Ruby anymore. For a kid's book, that's traumatizing. That had to be traumatizing. Oh, man. She was upset. It was a lot. I mean, it was really good. Like, in the end, it was like he did something good to save them. But it was like, all that stuff in the middle. Like, wow. Wow. But overall, it was pretty good. So now we start getting into the ones that I'm obsessed with. So in third place is going to be this book from Colleen Hoover. I'm on a huge kick with her. She's so good. She's such a good writer. I read Blvd. I ranked that too. That was really good. So this is called It Starts With Us. This actually is a sequel to another book that I will talk about in my top 2. So It Starts With Us is the aftermath of what happens to these people after they meet up again. So it's Atlas and Lily are their names, and they were separated whenever they were teenagers, and they finally met each other again in Boston. And she was married. She's now divorced and has a kid. So they're kind of just like navigating life with each other in it. A lot of things happen along the way, with Lily and her ex. Things, evolve with that. Atlas has some family issues. He hasn't seen or heard from his mom in 12, 15 years, something like that. And finally hears from her again. And she makes things really, really difficult, really hard. Trigger warning, though. There is talk of child abuse in this. I don't want to say it's like overly like intense and like in depth or anything like that, but there is just like some mentions of that with Atlas and his brother. So just be like forewarned. But I think the ending is really good. The only issue with me is like it was kind of, if you read the first book, you would know what would happen in this book. And I know she wrote it because so many people were like so obsessed with the story and so obsessed with the characters, so she wanted to continue on. But for the most part, you kind of knew how it was going to end. I mean, there was some stuff in the middle where you're just kind of like, okay, I wasn't really expecting that, but it wasn't like mind-blowing or revolutionary. But Colleen did such a good job of writing, and this is no exception. This was such a good book. I like literally plowed through this in like 3 days. It was phenomenal. So number 2 is actually the original one by Colleen Hoover called It Ends With Us. Trigger warning, if you are somebody who has ever been in a domestic violence situation, this could be triggering. So this starts with Lily, who has gone to her father's funeral to give a eulogy. And basically she says, the best things about my father are, and then walked away. So everybody thought it was because, she did that because she was just so upset. But actually, she really had nothing good to say about her father. Her father used to abuse her mom. And nobody would ever turn him in because he was somebody of power, within the community. Of course, per usual, right? So she goes to Boston because she always talks about how she wants to go to Boston. Yes. And she meets Ryle. And they start this like full-fledged romance, and then it turns out he has a lot of anger issues, and he starts here and there, I think it was like 3 or 4 times, hitting her, shoving her downstairs, trying to strangle her, things like that. And then she says she needs to separate, finds out that she's pregnant with his kid, is trying to make things work, trying to figure things out. Atlas comes back. In this book, what I really like is there are journal entries, and she kind of goes back and forth between like her childhood to like life today. And when she was little, she liked to write to Ellen DeGeneres, and she met Atlas through some very odd circumstances, and she just like wrote about that, and they eventually lost all contact. And it talks about why in this book. I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but it talks about why in this book. And they meet up in Boston together. And, things start swirling, but she's married. She knows that. She doesn't want to take anything further with Atlas. Her husband finds out. Of course, that creates a huge rage because he finds the journals that she has been keeping. And then at the end, she has to make, after her child's born, she has to make the decision to either end her marriage or to keep going because they have a child. And she makes a decision based on what's best for her and her child. So this is definitely a really, really good read as well. I think it was really good, like hearing, like this one was like, you don't really know exactly what's always going to happen. I think like after this ended and you kind of see where it ends, then the next part, you're just like, okay, we know what's going to happen. But this was really, really good. But again, if you are a victim of domestic violence, know somebody, this could be a trigger warning for you, just to let you know. So my number 1 book was Jar of Hearts. This is very, very good. So this is from the standpoint of somebody named Angela. I want to say, what was it, 15, 20 years ago, her best friend went missing. And nobody knew what happened to her. And they interviewed Angela. And she gave a story as to what happened. Well, now 15, 20 years later, whatever it is, they find her body in her best friend's backyard, childhood home backyard. And she is arrested. And she serves her time in jail. And then there's also somebody else, who she was dating at the time. I mean, this girl was like 14, 15, 16, like through those years, and she was dating somebody that was in their 20s. So, that's just in and of itself not okay, but he was not very nice to her. He was very, very mean, very manipulative. So he helped her out. Well, he escaped from prison and now she's out of jail. And the really odd parts is it kind of goes back and forth between like the childhood, and it talks about what leads up to like the murder, and then it talks about like where she is now and how she's trying to move forward with life. But now all these women are being murdered along with their children. So again, child death, trigger warning. But this is a very good book. But it's all pointed towards this Angela girl and this guy that she was seeing then. And then at the end just comes just this like massive twist that I did not see coming, because this guy had escaped from prison and, now was murdering all these people. Well, then you figure out why these like girls and these kids are being murdered, even though these kids were like adopted out, and it wasn't to these people that they were murdered with. And I mean, it's just a very wild ride. I also read this in literally just like a few days. It was so easy to read. Probably because I was like so enthralled. So that is it for today's video. I hope that you all enjoyed. If you did, definitely give this video a thumbs up. Let me know down below in the comments what's a book that you've read recently that you are enthralled with and in love with. I'm always wanting to add to my book collection. I have a little bookshelf at work where I literally just pull out the book and just read it in between, calls, in between tasks, whatever it is that I'm doing. So I'm really having a good time with that. So I plan on having more books read through relatively soon. But let me know if there's any books that you think I should check out. I really would like to know. But I will see you all in my next one. Bye.